The constant hum and clicking of the film projector accompanied the images flickering on the screen in the dimly lit room. Scenes of suffering, destruction, and death played out in stark black and white, challenging even the most battle-hardened viewer. This particular audience consisted of stateside staff officers attending a screening of John Huston's film, The Battle of San Pietro. This groundbreaking film claimed to depict American soldiers fighting the Germans in the Italian mountain town of San Pietro Infine. It showcased the harsh realities of one of World War II's most challenging campaigns, exposing the cost of the struggle on the path to Rome and raising questions about the heavy toll paid during the Italian campaign and in this specific battle against the Germans. Huston, a well-known figure who began his Hollywood career as a screenwriter in 1938 and gained acclaim with his directorial debut The Maltese Falcon in 1941, joined the U.S. Army Signal Corps in 1942 as a lieutenant. His nearly 50-year career in film included 2 Academy Awards and 15 nominations, with classics like The Treasure of the Sierra Madre The Asphalt Jumble The African Queen The Mystics Fat City The Man Who Would Be King and The Red Badge of Courage Before his discharge from the Army as a major, Huston made 3 documentary films for the Signal Corps, with The Battle of San Pietro being the most notable, although all 3 sparked controversy. Historians believe the film served several purposes: to give recruits and soldiers in basic training a glimpse of modern combat, to provide context for the challenges and slow progress of the Italian campaign, and to reassure the American public that senior and field commanders were carefully deploying troops and doing everything possible to save lives in the harsh realities of war. In creating this film, Huston and his 6-man camera crew crafted a powerful and unsettling anti-war statement. As the screening for the officers progressed, Huston realized the controversy his work had sparked. He later recounted, "A number of high-ranking officers, including a 3-star general, attended the first showing of The Battle of San Pietro *. About 3/4 of the way through, the general stood up and left the room. It was assumed he was displeased, prompting the others to leave as well, but in order of rank, following protocol. It wouldn't do for a lieutenant colonel to leave before a brigadier general. They filed out one by one, with the lowest-ranking officer last. I shook my head and thought, what a bunch of assholes! There goes San Pietro." The discomfort of a group of stateside Army officers paled in comparison to the real suffering endured by the soldiers of the 36th Infantry Division at San Pietro. Many of these soldiers, apparently captured on film, lived and died in the thick of battle. The 36th Division, a National Guard unit primarily composed of Texans, had a distinguished history dating back to the Republic of Texas in the 1830s. At San Pietro, the men of its 3 regiments, the 141st, 142nd, and 143rd, added to the division's reputation through their heroic actions. In December 1943, despite the adage that all roads lead to Rome, the Allied Fifth Army and its commander, Lieutenant Gen. Mark Clark, were focused on a single route to the Eternal City, Highway 6. This crucial road wound through the rugged terrain of southern Italy, into the broad valley of the Liri River, and onward to Rome, passing through San Pietro. Although Rome was 115 miles from San Pietro, the Germans were determined to contest every inch of the advance. They fortified the mountains, hills, and ravines, establishing anti-tank gun positions, machine gun nests, and roadblocks to impede Allied progress. The German 10th Army, commanded by Colonel Gen. Heinrich Gottfried von Vietinghoff-Scheel, was a seasoned and determined force, still brimming with resolve after weeks of combat since the Allies had landed at Salerno in September. On December 1, the Allied Fifth Army, led by Lieutenant Gen. Mark Clark, launched a major offensive aimed at capturing Rome and breaking through the formidable German defensive line once and for all. The operation was ambitious, involving multiple coordinated actions on a broad front. The American forces were tasked with advancing through the Mignano Gap, crossing the Rapido River, and capturing the town of Frosinone, located about 50 miles south of Rome. This move was crucial, as Frosinone's capture would open the path for further advances toward the Italian capital. Simultaneously, plans were in place for an amphibious landing, known as Operation Shingle, at the coastal town of Anzio, approximately 35 miles south of Rome. This daring maneuver aimed to outflank the German defenses, bypassing their heavily fortified positions and striking directly at the heart of their supply lines. The British forces operating on the Eastern Front were expected to advance toward Rome from a different direction. The goal was for the two Allied forces to converge on the city, capturing the first Axis capital to fall in World War II and trapping thousands of German troops in the process. However, the success of this bold strategy was far from guaranteed. The Italian campaign had already proven to be a grueling and costly endeavor, and the clock was ticking. Operation Overlord, the Allied invasion of Nazi-occupied Western Europe, was scheduled for June 6, 1944. This operation, crucial to the overall war effort, required the allocation of all available landing craft. The deadline for this transfer of resources was the end of January, meaning that the Anzio operation had a narrow window to succeed. If the Allies failed to secure the necessary foothold in Italy by then, the landing craft would be reassigned, and the opportunity for a decisive victory in the Italian theater would be lost. Complicating matters further was the challenging terrain of southern Italy, characterized by mountains, rivers, and valleys that provided natural defensive advantages. The German forces, under the command of Field Marshal Albert Kesselring, a former Luftwaffe officer turned ground commander, were executing a masterful defensive campaign. Kesselring's forces skillfully utilized the rugged landscape, constructing formidable defensive positions, including anti-tank gun emplacements, machine gun nests, and roadblocks. His leadership and strategic acumen were conducting one of the most effective defensive operations in military history, stalling the Allied advance and inflicting heavy casualties. As the Fifth Army advanced, they faced fierce resistance from Kesselring's troops, who were determined to defend every inch of ground. The battle for control of the Mignano Gap and the Rapido River crossings became a brutal and bloody struggle, with both sides suffering significant losses. The harsh winter weather and the difficult terrain further exacerbated the challenges faced by the Allied forces, slowing their progress and testing their resolve. Despite these obstacles, the Allies pushed forward, driven by the necessity of breaking through the German lines and advancing toward Rome. The stakes were high, as a successful campaign in Italy would not only remove a key Axis power from the war, but also provide a psychological boost to the Allied cause and pave the way for future operations in Europe. However, with time running out and the German defenses proving more resilient than anticipated, the outcome of the campaign remained uncertain. The Allied forces would need to overcome formidable challenges and demonstrate exceptional courage and determination to achieve their objectives and turn the tide in Italy. Up until that point, Field Marshal Albert Kesselring had orchestrated a masterful strategic retreat up the Italian peninsula, using the mountainous terrain to establish a series of formidable defensive lines. His forces effectively utilized the natural landscape, fortifying key positions and making the Allies pay dearly for every mile gained. The towns of San Pietro and San Vittore were pivotal in the Allied campaign. Their capture would allow American forces to advance toward the crucial stronghold of Cassino, which was a key component of the German Gustav Line, a critical defensive barrier in central Italy. At the onset of the offensive, the combined American-Canadian 1st Special Service Force, along with the British 56th Division, achieved significant victories by capturing Mont Camino and Monte La Defensa. Meanwhile, the 142nd Infantry Regiment secured Montmaggiore, which opened up the Mignano Gap, a vital passage for the advancing Allied forces. The Germans maintained control over the timing and location of any significant engagements, using each mountain and hilltop as a potential defensive stronghold. As the Allies pressed forward, the 36th Infantry Division found themselves positioned around Montelungo, a prominent natural feature along Highway 6 and the rail line leading to Rome. To the northeast stood Mont Saint-Lucro, rising nearly 4,000 feet above the valley, providing a strategic vantage point over the area. The village of San Pietro was nestled at the base of Monte San Pietro, strategically dominating the landscape and Highway 6 for miles around. Following the successful occupation of Montemaggiore and nearby Monte Rotondo, American commanders hoped that resistance at San Pietro would be minimal. They speculated that the Germans might have already begun to withdraw from the town to avoid being encircled by the advancing Allied forces. However, the situation was complicated by heavy rains that had swollen the Rapido and Garigliano rivers, making troop and vehicle movements challenging for the Germans. Additionally, Adolf Hitler issued a direct order to hold San Pietro for as long as possible, preventing any planned withdrawal. The defense of San Pietro was entrusted to the 2nd Battalion of the 15th Panzergrenadier Regiment, part of the 29th Panzergrenadier Division. This unit occupied the town itself, while 2 additional battalions, the 3rd Battalion of the 15th Panzergrenadier Regiment and the 2nd Battalion of the 71st Panzergrenadier Regiment, held positions on Monte Lungo and Monte San Pietro. These units, comprising some of the toughest and most experienced soldiers in the German army, were well prepared for a determined defense. As the Allies approached San Pietro, they faced a formidable enemy entrenched in well-prepared positions. The natural fortifications provided by the mountainous terrain, combined with the skill and resolve of the German Panzer Grenadiers, meant that the battle ahead would be fierce and bloody. The capture of San Pietro and the surrounding heights was crucial for the Allies, as it would allow them to push further north, ultimately aiming to break through the Gustav Line and advance toward Rome. However, the stubborn German defense, bolstered by Hitler's orders and the challenging weather conditions, set the stage for a brutal confrontation in the rugged Italian landscape. When American intelligence officers discovered that German forces were still entrenched around San Pietro, they underestimated the difficulty and bloodshed the battle would entail. The village's natural defenses, including stone buildings, rugged terrain, and narrow access routes, turned it into a formidable fortress. Historian Martin Blumenson noted, expecting Monte Lungo to come into Allied possession easily, Allied commanders looked toward San Pietro. What had escaped their intelligence officers was how inaccessible San Pietro really was. There were simply no good approaches to the village, where houses provided stout stone walls for weapons emplacement. Separated from Monte Rotondo and the Canavinel Hill by a deep gully, and sitting above the Sapagna Road, San Pietro could be entered only by way of cart tracks and trails across the ravine-scarred face of Monte San Pietro. Nor was it evident to Allied intelligence how important San Pietro was for the observation it gave of Monte Lungo and the trough that carried Highway 6 to Cassino. The tactical planning to seize San Pietro was led by Major Gen. Jeffrey Case, commander of the U.S. I Corps, and Major Gen. Fred L. Walker, commander of the 36th Division. Keyes believed that the newly allied Italian 1st Motorized Group could benefit from a morale-boosting victory, especially since Italy had recently switched sides to join the Allies against its former Axis partners. Keyes tasked the Italian troops with capturing the summit of Monte Lungo. Meanwhile, 2 battalions of the 143rd Infantry Regiment were assigned to take Monte San Pietro, maneuver around it, oust the Germans from San Pietro, and proceed toward San Vittore. The attack commenced on the morning of December 8, with the Italian troops ascending the slopes of Monte Lungo. As they advanced, 2 battalions abreast, they encountered the well-prepared defenses of the 3rd Battalion, 15th Panzergrenadier Regiment. The Germans had fortified their positions and accurately targeted the approaches, making the ascent perilous. Within hours, the Italian assault began to falter under intense German fire. The harsh reality of combat set in as the Italians suffered significant casualties: 84 killed, 122 wounded, and 170 missing. The troops, overwhelmed and disorganized, were forced to retreat down the mountainside. The failure of the Italian advance underscored the formidable nature of the German defenses and the challenging terrain, complicating the Allied plans to secure San Pietro and the surrounding area. The setback also highlighted the stark challenges the Allies faced in breaking through the Gustav Line and advancing towards Rome. As dawn broke, the 1st Battalion of the 143rd Infantry Regiment successfully overran German positions on Mont San Pietro. They were soon reinforced by the 504th Parachute Infantry Regiment, allowing the Americans to establish defensive positions and repel repeated counterattacks by the 2nd Battalion, 71st Panzergrenadier Regiment. The Americans also took control of adjacent Hill 1205, and although the 3rd Ranger Battalion initially captured Hill 950, they were temporarily pushed back by a fierce German counterattack. On December 9, the Rangers regrouped and launched a determined assault, retaking and holding the hill. Meanwhile, the 2nd and 3rd Battalions of the 143rd Infantry Regiment made a direct push toward San Pietro. However, their advance was halted just 400 yards in by the entrenched 2nd Battalion, 15th Panzergrenadier Regiment. By December 10, the 1st Battalion had been reduced to half its strength, with only 340 combat-effective infantrymen remaining. Stunned by the tenacity of the German defense, American commanders planned a renewed offensive to capture San Pietro, scheduled for December 15 to 17. General Walker identified a strategic opportunity in the capture of 3 small hills about a mile west of Hill 1205. By occupying these hills, the 36th Division could potentially flank the German garrison in San Pietro and isolate the entire 3rd Battalion, 15th Panzergrenadiers on Monte Longo. Walker ordered the 504th Parachute Infantry Regiment and the 1st Battalion, 143rd Infantry to seize the 3 hills before sunrise on December 15. The plan called for a coordinated assault, with tanks from the 753rd Tank Battalion attacking from the east and the 141st Infantry advancing from the north near Monte Rotondo. This two-pronged approach aimed to overwhelm the German defenders in San Pietro, forcing them to focus on their immediate defense rather than supporting their comrades on Monte Longo. With the Germans in San Pietro preoccupied, elements of the 142nd and 143rd Infantry Regiments would seize the opportunity to attack Monte Longo from the west, further stretching the German defensive lines and potentially breaking their hold on this crucial section of the Gustav Line. The operation represented a critical juncture in the battle, as success could pave the way for a decisive breakthrough in the Allied advance toward Rome. In the rugged, mountainous regions of Italy, the deployment of tanks was a challenging and often risky proposition. Despite these challenges, General Mark Clark was eager to bring armor into play around San Pietro. General Jeffrey Keyes, commanding the U.S.I. Corps, concurred with this approach, recognizing the potential advantages of armored support in breaking through the German defenses. To expedite this, Clark dispatched 5th Army Operations Officer Bray, Gen. Donald W. Brand to the headquarters of Major Gen. Fred L. Walker's 36th Division, with a strong recommendation to deploy tanks at the earliest opportunity. During their meeting, Brand inquired about the practicality of using tanks in the San Pietro area. Walker responded candidly, highlighting the unsuitability of the terrain for armored vehicles. The narrow roads and steep, terraced slopes posed significant obstacles, making tank maneuvers difficult and dangerous. Despite these concerns, Brand understood the directive and agreed to attempt to employ tanks in the operation. The subsequent attempt to deploy tanks became a cautionary tale of the difficulties inherent in using armored vehicles in such unforgiving terrain. The primary route to San Pietro was a narrow road barely wide enough for two-way traffic. It was intersected by a few narrow trails, none wider than 8 feet. These constraints made the road perilous for any vehicle under fire, especially for tanks, which require a wider path to maneuver effectively. 4 critical choke points along the route posed additional risks. These included 2 culverts measuring 10 and 15 feet and a pair of bridges, all of which could easily be targeted by German defenders. The narrowness of the road and the vulnerability of these choke points made any tank passing through highly susceptible to concentrated enemy fire. Adding to the challenge, the slopes of Mont San Pietro were terraced, with retaining walls up to 7 feet high separating the levels. These terraces further restricted movement and offered little cover or concealment for advancing tanks. As anticipated, the operation to bring tanks into action around San Pietro proved disastrous. The armored vehicles struggled to navigate the tight confines of the road, and were exposed to heavy fire from well-positioned German anti-tank guns and infantry. The difficult terrain and well-prepared German defenses turned the deployment into a costly failure, with tanks either immobilized or destroyed before they could effectively contribute to the assault. The episode underscored the inherent difficulties of using armor in the mountainous terrain of Italy. It also highlighted the tension between strategic directives and the practical realities on the ground. While the use of tanks could potentially break the stalemate, the specific conditions around San Pietro made their deployment more of a liability than an asset. This experience served as a sobering lesson for the Allied commanders as they continued to grapple with the challenges of the Italian campaign. On December 11, combat engineers attempted to improve the challenging terrain around San Pietro for the planned tank operations. They demolished some of the terrace walls and blasted paths to facilitate the movement of tanks through the hills above the town. The lead tank made its advance after dark, but quickly lost traction in the rain-soaked ground, throwing a track. The noise and disturbance drew the attention of German artillery, which began shelling the area, forcing the effort to be abandoned. On December 15, while the 1st Battalion, 143rd Infantry, and the 504th Parachute Infantry Regiment made repeated, unsuccessful attempts to capture the 3 hills designated by General Walker, the armored assault began. 16 M4 Sherman medium tanks from Company A, 753rd Tank Battalion, accompanied by a company of infantry and a borrowed British Valentine tank equipped with a prefabricated bridge, set out at mid-morning. The original plan called for a 2-pronged attack on the town, but it quickly unraveled when the lead tank encountered a blocked road. Redirected across the terraces, the tank managed to destroy a German command post and several machine gun nests. However, the German forces were slow to react to this threat, and it wasn't until later that their artillery began targeting the tanks. The lead tank's path was soon impeded by the wreckage of a German IV tank, halting the progress of the following tanks. These tanks, unable to follow the lead due to the steepness of the terraces, were ordered to withdraw to the main road and shell the town in preparation for the infantry assault. The attempt to maneuver tanks through the challenging terrain quickly turned disastrous. About 1,000 yards from San Pietro, the first of the 3 following Shermans reached a bridge, crossed it, and was immediately set ablaze by a German anti-tank round. The 2nd Sherman crossed the bridge but was struck by 2 shells and also caught fire. The 3rd tank was hit by 3 shells before even reaching the bridge. German gunners, having accurately ranged their targets, were devastatingly effective. The next 3 Shermans in line hit mines, further adding to the losses. As the situation deteriorated, one M4 Sherman fell off the edge of the road, flipping over and landing 5 feet below. 3 more Shermans threw their tracks, becoming immobile. Another Sherman tried to follow the lead tank across the terraces but lost traction and turned over on its side. In the ensuing chaos, one Sherman collided with another already disabled tank. The Valentine tank, although not damaged, became trapped among the wrecked Shermans and had to be abandoned. Out of the 16 Shermans that started the assault, only 4 returned unscathed. The other 12 were either destroyed or disabled, with 5 later recovered and repaired. This disastrous outcome highlighted the severe limitations and dangers of using armored vehicles in such difficult terrain, especially against a well-prepared and tenacious enemy like the Germans in San Pietro. Lieutenant John Huston of the Signal Corps observed the tank assault from the front lines. His first-hand account of the operation provided a strikingly vivid and critical perspective. Huston remarked, "This was a most ill-conceived plan, undoubtedly conceived by someone back of the lines who didn't know the first damn thing about the terrain around the village. The right side of the road was a mountainside, and the other side was a drop-off down the mountain. Once committed, the tanks couldn't turn round. We could see the tanks burning and exploding and men running and trying to hide. After it was over, we crept forward and photographed the disastrous results. It wasn't pretty. There was a boot here with a foot, part of a leg still in it, a burned torso there. Sergeant Ray Wells of the 2nd Battalion, 141st Infantry, who was supposed to receive support from the tanks, also witnessed the assault. He recalled, "I was watching them from what seemed to be a mile away. I saw the tanks go up that road. They were moving slowly because of the curbs, and they were hitting mines. When they got to where the German 88s could knock them out, the tank behind would just push aside one that was hit and just keep on going. The tankers were a bunch of brave people, that's for sure. Both accounts underscore the harsh realities of the battle and the immense challenges faced by the American forces. Huston's observations highlight the strategic and tactical misjudgments that led to the disastrous outcome, while Wells' comments reflect the courage and determination of the tank crews who faced overwhelming odds. Lieutenant Colonel Milton Landry, who commanded the 2nd Battalion, 141st Infantry during the intense fighting at San Pietro, provided a detailed and harrowing account of his unit's experience. On December 15, his battalion was tasked with intercepting any German resupply efforts coming from the west. They began their operation around noon. Landry recounted, "We had companies E, F, G, H, and the battalion headquarters company. I lost 3 company commanders in the first 30 minutes. Captain Charles Beecham was shot through the cheek, and Ray Wells pulled him out of the line of fire. Captain Charles Hanner was killed, and Captain John Chapin was also wounded. I remember the fact that we had men falling left and right all the way through. We attacked all afternoon and up into the night. We lost so many men that Company L was sent to join us. When we were finally ordered to pull back, there were 42 of us left in the battalion, plus the extra rifle company. I would say we had close to 800 men when we started." Landry's leadership was marked by personal bravery, as he was wounded 3 times during the fighting from December 15 to 17. For his heroism, he later received the Distinguished Service Cross. He described the daunting terrain and challenges faced. The terrain facing San Pietro was terraced almost the complete distance from Monte Rotondo to the town itself, and most of the terraces had a wire fence on top and near the edge. In almost every case, the enemy had installed a booby trap of some kind. We had to figure a way to eliminate this hazard, and we came up with an almost foolproof plan. 2 of the larger men would lift me up so I could take hold of the tripwire, and when I gave the signal, they would drop me so I could pull the wire down with me, explode the booby trap, and at the same time be protected by the rock wall which bordered the terrace. The German defenders had meticulously fortified their positions around San Pietro. Landry described the difficulties of fighting against such well-prepared opponents. You couldn't see them. You had to go up and across one terrace, and then there was always another one. You could look in at the wall and see what you thought was a black rock, but it wasn't a rock. It was a hole with a machine gun on the other side where the Germans had dug a big pit and connecting trenches where they could crawl back and forth. They covered the tops of the pits with railroad crosties, dirt, and plants. They could sit in there with wine, black bread, and cheese that comes out of a tube like toothpaste and wait for us. Landry's account highlights the harsh realities of combat in the rugged terrain around San Pietro and the extreme challenges faced by his unit in overcoming the German defenses. Lieutenant Colonel Milton Landry faced additional difficulties due to the limitations of the intelligence and maps available to his unit. He relied on highway maps that his battalion surgeon had procured in North Africa. These maps, while useful, were inadequate for the complex and rugged terrain of the San Pietro area. Landry noted, "The highway maps were just as good as our government maps. The scale on them was terribly small, though. You could make a line on the map with a pencil, and crossing that line on the ground would take 200 or 300 yards. On the map, that distance was only as thick as the pencil lead. We would get copies of Life magazine, and they would show us not having moved at all. We would fight for 2 or 3 weeks up and down mountains, and on the maps it looked like we hadn't advanced." In a bizarre twist, Landry discovered a brass survey marker embedded in a rock while seeking cover from a German shell. He explained, "I was laying my head on the plate, and it meant that there were good maps of the entire area. We just couldn't get them because nobody knew we had them. This discovery highlighted the frustrations of navigating with inadequate maps while the more precise survey data was available but not accessible to those in the field." Lieutenant Ray Wells vividly recalled the intense fighting during the battle. He described how many of his squad members were quickly wounded, with German snipers targeting them with deadly accuracy. "Most of the men in my squad were wounded right away. The Germans were looking right down our throats all the time. The snipers were pretty accurate. A lot of the people I saw were shot right between the eyes. Our medics had helmets with red crosses on them, and I saw some of them shot by bullets that went right through the middle of that cross," he said. In response to the sniper threat, Wells ordered suppressing fire on buildings where snipers were believed to be hiding. "The enemy was in the houses upstairs, shooting out the windows at us," Landry recounted. Wells, then leading a heavy machine gun squad, had to make do with a one-man light machine gun after his original crew's water-cooled machine gun was abandoned. Despite the challenging conditions, Wells managed to act as a rear guard during the battalion's withdrawal back to Monte Rotondo. His actions likely neutralized at least 3 German snipers and saved numerous comrades. "You just go on to the next one and do your best, but I never felt like going over and looking," he noted. His bravery was later recognized with the Silver Star. As the 2nd Battalion, 141st Infantry engaged in the brutal fight, the 2nd Battalion, 142nd and 3rd Battalion, 143rd worked their way around Montelongo, crossing Highway 6. Their advance led them to capture the summit of Montelongo despite strong resistance from the Reconnaissance Battalion of the 29th Panzergrenadier Division. By the morning of December 16, most of the high ground in the area was under Allied control, with the Italians securing the last strong points along the ridgeline. The fall of Montelongo significantly impacted the German defenders' ability to hold San Pietro. With American forces also on Mont Saint-Michel, the Germans faced the real possibility of having their evacuation route along Highway 6 cut off. German commanders prepared for withdrawal and launched a diversionary counterattack on the night of December 16 to cover the retreat of the 29th Panzergrenadier Division from San Pietro. When the 143rd Infantry Regiment entered the town the next day, they found it devastated, with 300 civilian casualties and extensive damage throughout the village. The American forces, having suffered 1,000 killed and wounded, concluded their grueling battle for San Pietro. John Huston's documentary, The Battle of San Pietro, provides a raw and impactful portrayal of the intense fighting that occurred during the battle. Huston's camera crew closely followed the 143rd Infantry Regiment, capturing the stark realities of combat. Huston later reflected on the experience, noting how he had interviewed soldiers before the battle, capturing their hopes and dreams. The juxtaposition of their voices with their dead faces, shown in the uncut version of the film, created a powerful and unsettling effect. Despite its dramatic and poignant portrayal, the film faced significant criticism from top Army officials. Army Chief of Staff General George C. Marshall was one of the few who saw its value, stating that the film should be shown to every American soldier in training to prepare them for the shock of combat. However, due to its graphic content and the controversy it stirred, the film was heavily edited and rarely screened until after World War II. In the decades following the war, The Battle of San Pietro garnered attention for its unique approach to documentary filmmaking. Madge Mackenzie, writing in the New York Times in the 1980s, praised the film for its unflinching depiction of battle. She noted that it was the only complete record of an infantry battle, filmed in a style that was both immediate and immersive. Film historians continue to debate the authenticity of the footage in Huston's documentary. Some assert that the film includes scenes of soldiers who appear alive in archival reels even after being shown as dead in the combat footage. Nonetheless, the film is recognized for its strong anti-war message and its significant place in documentary history. Lieutenant Colonel Milton Landry also noted the challenges faced by combat cameramen in his battalion. He recounted how, during combat, camera operators continued filming even after being hit, with cameras sometimes rolling down hills. The angles captured could create misleading visuals, such as mortar crews appearing to fire from an unrealistic position due to the hill's slope. Huston's work remains a powerful document of the brutality of war and the personal sacrifices of those involved, cementing its place as a significant piece of World War II history. The battle for San Pietro and its aftermath reflect the intense and often tragic nature of World War II combat. Lieutenant Colonel Milton Landry's candid reflections highlight the immense cost and tactical difficulties faced by the 36th Infantry Division. The battle's brutal realities, compounded by the difficult terrain and the determined German defenses, showcase the harsh conditions and the heavy price of warfare. John Huston's film, The Battle of San Pietro, provides a raw and unfiltered look at the combat experience despite its controversial reception. The film's stark portrayal of the battle, combined with the personal testimonies of soldiers like Sergeant Ray Wells and Lieutenant Colonel Landry, underscores the complex and often brutal nature of war. Landry's critique of the daylight assault and the subsequent fighting at the Rapido River and the Gustav Line further emphasizes the harsh and often ill-planned nature of some military operations. The eventual capture of Rome and the protracted fighting in Italy set the stage for the larger Allied operations in Western Europe, including the Normandy landings.